If you were to ask me what my favourite film genre was, it definitely wouldn't be the Western. The miles of desert stretching out endlessly, the harsh biting winds promising to deposit sand into every orifice, and the unsavoury characters that only seem to be able to resolve their differences with a shootout. None of these things really appeal to me. However, Media.Vision's Wild Arms for the Sony PlayStation, whilst keeping some of the themes and motifs of a Western, offers something a little more substantial. Published by Sony Computer Entertainment in 1996 in Japan, 1997 in NA territories, and 1998 in PAL regions, Wild Arms offers us an adventure across a dying land where the remnants of civilization battle against the desertification of their world. Unlike other contemporaries of the time, which placed you in the shoes of a single protagonist tasked with recruiting others to their cause, Wild Arms offers 3 unique protagonists that equally share the limelight of the story. From the get-go, you must choose which of the 3 characters you want to start with, and play through all of them, gathering them in the city of Adelheid, where travel as a party can begin. The 3 protagonists are Rudy, a young dream chaser, which is kind of a mercenary or treasure hunter. He is currently residing in Surf Village on the frontier, where unbeknownst to his hosts, he harbours a forbidden power. Jack is also a dream chaser, however he is seeking the Guardian Blade, an artifact that is rumoured to be the most powerful weapon in the world. We join him as he narrowly avoids death in the trap-filled Memory Temple. Finally, there is Cecilia, a girl studying the art of magic at the Kirin Abbey. While she appears modest at face value, she's actually the Princess of Adelheid, and this places a great burden upon her. Our time with her begins as she is summoned by a mysterious force who calls her the Innocent One. This causes her to begin a search to locate the source of her vision deep within a sealed library. I liked that all 3 characters had their own motivations and reasons for existing, rather than cookie-cutter characters that exist for the sole purpose of driving the narrative forward. Once all prologues have completed, the 3 characters join together in Adelheid to take on a quest that involves assisting with an archaeological dig. Following this event, there is a festival held by the city celebrating the artifacts from a lost civilization that have been recovered and put on display. It is during this festival that the antagonists of the story attack, destroying the city and snuffing out the lives of its citizens before our very eyes. The demon race descends from the heavens demanding the Crystal Tear, an heirloom of the Adelheid royal family that Cecilia keeps as a memento of her late mother. Disobeying her father's wishes not to hand the item over, she delivers it to the demons in the hopes that it will spare the people of the city from any more suffering. The demons leave, the king passes from his injuries sustained in the battle, and a mass funeral marks the true beginning of the game. I always found this scene to be really touching, even though it's delivered with just visuals and music. You can truly feel for the people who had lost their loved ones in the attack, as the funeral procession of multiple caskets marches their way through the damaged streets. Once you regain control of your party, it is up to you to track down the demons to get the Crystal Tear back and put a stop to their sinister plans. To do so, you must traverse the dying world of Filgaia, which is slowly in the process of turning into a desert due to the damage done from a war with the demon race 1,000 years in the past, as well as the lack of faith from the humans in the Guardians that sustain the life of the world. The party's adventures will take them through fields, caves, deserts, and a snowy tundra, as each protagonist searches for their individual raison d'etre. In terms of the themes of the game, I really enjoyed what Wild Arms presented as a whole. Sure, there are a lot of common tropes that appear, such as the warrior just wanting power to get revenge, or the evil creature that just wants to destroy the entire world with no motivation other than just being evil. However, I felt these tropes were approached in a way that made the story interesting. Yes, Jack is looking for the ultimate power, but his reasons for this lie in the distant past. If you leave the title screen to hang, you'll be presented a short prologue that details events that put the story into motion. The musical score that accompanies the fall of the Kingdom of Arctica really sets the mood for the entire game. I thought this was a great way to introduce the player to the story, in a similar fashion to how Valkyrie Profile handles this same exposition. Regarding the Western themes of the game, I enjoyed the subversion, such as firearms being forbidden machines that are feared by humankind. Also, the Baskar tribe presents similar motifs to Native Americans, however rather than being persecuted, they are living their own life close with nature, separate from the other races of the world. Rather than the persecution being directed against them, it's instead directed against the Elu tribe, who through the story are claimed to be the ones that brought about the beginning of the world's decay. The dungeons in Wild Arms differ from the usual affair in that they are extremely puzzle heavy. Most of the puzzles require a tool to solve, such as a lighter to light a lamp or a jug of water to put out flames. Each character has 4 different tools that they can find along the course of the adventure, with a total count of 12. Whilst generally the tools work most effectively in the dungeon that they were discovered in, later in the game you'll be required to use tools in unconventional ways, such as using Handpan the Wind Mouse to make a boy move out of the way so that you can talk to the nun standing behind him. Most of the time the puzzles are pretty straightforward, though there may be times where you will be left scratching your head. If you get stuck, I'd recommend talking to all of the NPCs in the towns, as generally they can give you hints to solve some of the puzzles, or will direct you to where you should go in points of the story where this may not be clear. On the topic of tools, I also wanted to mention that I was mortified that I could bomb the dog in Surf Village, making him fly into the air, flurrying his poor paws, unawares of what just happened. Following this, he angrily barked at my heels until I left the village. I'm sorry! As you're exploring hostile areas, you will get drawn into random battles. Sometimes these are reasonable in that they don't occur often, and other times they happen frequently. I believe each area's encounter rate was programmed differently. If you don't want to fight, you can get a spell later called Invisible, which limits the number of battles that you have to face, but I only found this useful in a few rare circumstances. You probably should be battling the enemies though, unless you want the bosses to wipe the floor with your corpses. Battle is a standard turn-based affair, however there are some slight changes. In addition to the standard HP and MP counts, characters also have FP or Force Points, which accumulate in each battle. In every new battle, the FP gauge starts at 0, and characters will gain a percentage of it by either attacking the enemy or being attacked. At each quarter, excluding 0, the characters have unique abilities that they can use to assist them in battle. For example, Cecilia's 25% ability Mystic allows her to enhance the properties of an item. In the case of a heal berry, for example, it will extend the effect to all party members rather than just one. Rudy's ability Lock On allows his arm to have a 100% hit ratio. It's all well and good to use these as required, but when the gauge gets to 100%, a character will enter the condition green status. This removes all negative effects from them, as well as protecting them from any future negative status effect. So you really need to decide whether to risk using an FP move, or staying protected, as many enemies will use negative status effects against you. You may think, oh that's fine, I'll just clear the status effect with a spell or an item. Don't worry, I thought this too. Unfortunately, Cecilia doesn't get a spell with such a function until later in the game. Additionally, items can be used up so quickly, as the enemies love to use negative effect spells. The FP gauge grows so slowly that it's not always feasible to rely on it to clear statuses in normal battles, as using the defend command will increase your character's propensity for counterattacks, meaning the enemies are generally dead before your character reaches the 100% threshold. Also, most negative status effects persist outside of battle, so they will either affect you in the field, such as poison making you lose health with every step, or confuse reversing your controls. Some negative status effects will even persist into the following battle. In this way, I really enjoyed that I had to really think about what items I needed to be stocking for my adventure, to make sure I never disadvantage myself. Most other JRPGs of the time either overloaded you with curative items, or gave you an easy way to remove bad statuses with a simple spell. It was refreshing to have to think carefully about how to deal with any given situation. Each character can wear equipment that is unique to them with the exception of accessories and medium stones that can be shared across all characters. It would have been nice to be able to equip skills separately, or be able to choose which guardian you wanted to summon, rather than have these restrictions in place. Don't worry, I'm well aware that this was fixed in the remake, Wild Arms Alter Code F. In addition to the FP abilities, our characters also have their own unique skills and ways of acquiring them. Jack uses fast draw techniques. These skills are picked up through hints in the environment and must be used repeatedly until he learns them. Rudy can use arms, a forbidden technology that are basically firearms. These can be upgraded by arms masters through Filgaia, enhancing their attack power, accuracy, and number of bullets. This can be a very expensive endeavour. Finally, Cecilia can learn various forms of magic. However, in order to have magic, she must first find a crest graph and then bind a spell to it at a magic guild. In the beginning of the game, you are very limited in the number of crest graphs that you have, so you may need to pick and choose which spells you want carefully. Don't worry though, as you can unbind a spell to choose a different one, and you will also gain enough crest graphs throughout the course of your adventure to learn all the spells that you need. Spells are really broken too. Debilitation spells, with the exception of instant death, never miss, even on bosses. They sometimes also stack, so you can keep using the same spells to reduce the speed, attack, and defense of a boss. This also applies to buff spells, which when abused make the game super easy. There are a few things to keep you occupied outside of the general narrative, which I found was a nice distraction from the story. When you get a boat, you can explore the outer ocean. It's possible to find an arena where you can battle really tough monsters for prizes. There are also a couple of side dungeons and secret bosses to battle against, which are all opened up before you take on the final boss of the game. My favourite pastime though was donating money to the Adelheid Restoration Fund. By donating money, you can assist to reconstruct the town, which is probably one of my favourite side things to do in any JRPG. Seeing the city go from broken cobblestones and dishevelled houses to being expanded larger than the original town put a huge smile on my face. Don't worry, if kindness isn't a motivator for you, there are unique rewards that you can also get for completing this task. One of the biggest issues of this game for me, which seems to be a common theme with Sony PlayStation era titles, is its localization. Whilst the localization team didn't take as many liberties as, say, the #1 culprit working designs, there are still things such as references to real-world objects, as well as language that just doesn't sit right with the character that's saying it. Also, the dialogue doesn't seem to flow naturally in some scenes, and is quite jilted. The sometimes awkward dialogue makes it difficult to emotionally invest into some of the scenes, so I often found myself questioning the linguistic choices of the translators. Graphically, I felt the game was a little on the common side. Many of the assets, especially for dungeons and cities and towns, are reused tile sets, just coloured different or with a few unique embellishments. On the positive side though, whilst the game mostly functions in 2D, the battles are rendered in complete 3D, similar to how Final Fantasy VII has different render types for fields and battles. Unfortunately, the battle backdrops are usually very similar and not visually distinct. Many of the spell effects also look kind of bland, and often you'll find that Cecilia's spells share the same animation as unique monster spells. The monsters' designs themselves, however, are very interesting. I was quite surprised that many of the models are grotesque in design and would easily slot into the setting of a horror game. The music was composed by Michiko Naruke, who has basically handled the compositions of all Wild Arms games, and you may know her as one of the guest composers for the upcoming Eiyuden Chronicles. I am of two minds with her music in this game. Where she really shines is in the scenes that have been composed for specifically, such as the Fall of Arctica. Also, any of the themes that include chanting are spine-chilling. When it comes to dungeon themes, however, many of the tracks are less than 1 minute in length, and can become grating when listened to continuously. I guess the reason for the short track lengths would be because of the choice of dungeon design, in that the dungeon theme starts from the beginning after concluding a battle, rather than it continuing from where it was when the battle began. Still, I would have liked to have seen a little more variety and length to the dungeon tracks. My favourite track in the game is Funeral March. It plays during the mass funeral in Adelheid, and as I mentioned before, is very moving. The gentle chorus really encapsulates the sadness of the people who have unexpectedly lost their loved ones. It never fails to elicit my tears. One other comment I want to make about the sound design is about the sound effects. And that is that the enemies all share a bank of like 3 sounds, one of which sounds like a cat who you've just accidentally stepped on the tail of. Wild Arms is a game that really surprised me and subverted my expectations. Whilst I had originally thought that due to the Western theme I wouldn't enjoy it, I was very wrong. The FP system and requirement to strictly manage your items made the game a strategic endeavour where I had to be careful not to overextend my party. The puzzle dungeons and the necessity to be creative with your tool usage on some occasions did sometimes make me scratch my head, but ultimately worked very well. It's just a shame that the graphics were a bit samey in an era where other developers were pushing boundaries of what they could achieve with the hardware of the Sony PlayStation. In any case, if you're looking for a solid adventure with a group of 3 very likeable heroes, you would be remiss not to pick up Wild Arms. By the way, have you ever seen a game where initially you thought you'd hate it or even put off playing it because of preconceived conceptions about it, only to be completely subverted when you actually got over your notions and tried it? Let me know in the comments! This has been Venwa with a review of Wild Arms for the Sony PlayStation. If you enjoyed this review, feel free to like and subscribe as it helps me out a bunch. As always, thanks for watching and I hope to see you all again next time. Bye bye for now.